What if I told you that Nazism didn't just march with tanks, but with symbols and occult rituals?
A secret society, the Thule, dreamed of a sacred bloodline for the Aryan race.
The Wewelsburg Castle was transformed into a pagan cathedral, where the SS held ceremonies with fire and dark oaths.
Obsessed with relics like the Spear of Destiny and the Holy Grail, they sought to legitimize their power as a divine empire.
Hitler did not present himself only as a leader, but as a political messiah, in a Reich that wanted to replace God himself.
Coders. Sometimes we believe Nazism was only politics, war, and tyranny. But behind Hitler's speeches and the marching troops, there was a hidden world, almost invisible. A puzzle of symbols, relics, and rituals that turned a party into something far more disturbing. A political cult disguised as religion. Why talk about this today? Because history shows us that power is not built only with weapons, but also with beliefs. And the Nazis understood this better than anyone. They knew how to use mysticism, myths, and faith to shape millions of people. This topic matters because it is not only the past, it is a warning. If one regime was capable of presenting itself as the sacred, what assures us it won't happen again in another form? So, coders, join me in deciphering one of the darkest aspects of the Third Reich. The moment when Nazism tried to replace God with symbols, rituals, and a political messiah.
Historical context coders. We are in Germany in the 1930s, a country battered by the First World War, sunk in economic crisis, humiliated by defeat, and desperately searching for a way out. In the middle of that chaos, Adolf Hitler rises with his message of power and national pride. He promises to lift Germany up and create a new empire, the Third Reich. But this project was not only political or military. It also had a much darker undertone. Around Hitler were key figures like Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, and other leaders who did not only believe in weapons and propaganda, but also in symbols, myths, and rituals. They thought the Reich needed not only strength, but also a mystical aura that made it seem inevitable, almost sacred. That's how politics began to mix with the occult. Nazism did not present itself only as a party, but as a kind of political religion with symbols, ceremonies, and beliefs designed to shape the minds of an entire people. And this is where the occult roots of Nazism enter. The first step of this puzzle we are going to decipher together.
The occult roots of Nazism, coders. To understand the darkest side of Nazism, we have to look beyond politics and war. In its roots, there was a strange cocktail of secret societies, symbols, and mystical beliefs. One of the most influential groups was the Thule Society. It wasn't just a club, but a circle that mixed racist ideas with occultism, astrology, and Germanic mythology. There, people spoke of a mythical past of the Aryan race, almost as if it were a sacred bloodline. And it wasn't just theory. Figures like Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, were obsessed with runes and Nordic tradition. For him, those symbols carried real, almost spiritual power that could give identity to his army. Even Hitler understood very well how to use symbols. The swastika, the red flags, the marches. None of it was accidental. It was all part of a visual language designed to give the Reich an almost magical aura, capable of moving crowds.
Rejection of Christianity and the idea of a pagan cult coders. If Nazism made one thing clear, it was that Christianity did not fit into its vision. For many of its leaders, the Christian faith was weak, too centered on humility and forgiveness. None of that aligned with the idea of an Aryan empire based on strength, blood, and war. That's why several high-ranking officials dreamed of returning to a pre-Christian past, a world of Norse gods, runes, and Germanic myths, where violence was seen as glory and sacrifice as destiny. That was the root they wanted to revive to give the Third Reich its identity. Some even proposed something far more radical, replacing churches, not with Christian temples, but with Reich ceremonies, where parades, torches, and symbols would become the new rituals of faith. For Himmler, head of the SS, the Reich needed its own political religion, a faith designed not to save souls, but to mold obedience and glorify the Aryan race. In other words, coders. The goal wasn't to coexist with Christianity, but to supplant it with a new cult, tailor-made for a regime that wanted to become the sacred itself.
The power of symbols and rituals. Coders. If Nazism understood anything, it was the power of symbols. The swastika, for example, was not invented by them. It was an ancient solar symbol used in many cultures. But by putting it on red flags, armbands, and uniforms, they transformed it into the absolute emblem of the Reich. Every appearance of that sign was a visual reminder of power. Within the SS, Himmler took this further. He introduced Germanic runes, each charged with mysticism. The double S rune, which became its emblem, wasn't just a design. It represented strength and destiny, almost like a collective talisman. The center of this imagery was Wewelsburg Castle. Himmler envisioned it as a kind of pagan cathedral for the SS. Circular halls were designed, symbols on the floors, and spaces intended for secret ceremonies, as if they were rituals of a new religion. And those rituals did exist.
The search for relics and myths coders. If there was something that obsessed Nazism, it was the power of the invisible. Tanks and armies weren't enough. They wanted to seize the sacred. That's why Himmler and his SS launched expeditions across Europe and Asia. From Tibet to medieval castles, they searched for relics and myths that could give the Reich an almost divine aura. Among their obsessions was the Spear of Destiny, the same one that, according to tradition, pierced Christ's side on the cross. They believed that whoever possessed that spear would hold the power to rule the world. They also pursued the Holy Grail, not as a Christian symbol, but as an Aryan object of power, capable of legitimizing the Reich as heir to a sacred lineage. They even fantasized about Atlantis, seeing it as the lost cradle of a superior race. But why did they seek all this? Because they understood that weapons dominate bodies, but symbols dominate souls. If they could convince people that the Reich was the heir to these relics, they wouldn't just be a government. They would be an inevitable destiny, almost prophetic. Thus, each relic served to replace traditional religion and dress Nazism in the robes of myth, mystery, and supernatural power.
The replacement of God by the Reich coders. Nazism didn't just want to conquer territories, it wanted to conquer people's faith. For them, Christianity was weak, foreign, alien to the Aryan spirit. The solution? Turn the Reich into the new religion. Hitler presented himself as a political messiah. His speeches were not just politics. They had an almost prophetic tone, with crowds following him as if they were listening to revelations. The Third Reich was baptized as the 1,000-year kingdom, a direct echo of the biblical idea of Christ's millennial reign, but inverted. Instead of God reigning, it was the Aryan people under the Führer. Sacrifice for the fatherland became a form of redemption. Dying in battle was not seen as a loss, but as a sacred offering to secure the eternity of the Reich. And why all this? Because they understood that religion moves hearts more than any ideology. If they managed to replace God with the Reich, then loyalty wouldn't be to a creed, but to the Führer. Churches, crucifixes, and the Bible became obstacles. What they wanted was for the new altar to be the flag with the swastika. In practice, the Reich sought to be a collective God, with its Messiah, its kingdom, its rituals, and its promise of salvation. but all in service of a political empire.
Points of debate, coders. After everything we've seen, the big question arises. Was Nazism really an occult movement? Or did they simply use mysticism as a political tool? Some historians believe Hitler and the High Command were true believers in these esoteric ideas, convinced that symbols and relics held real power. Others, however, think it was pure calculation. They knew magic, myths, and rituals had enormous emotional impact, and they used them to manipulate masses hungry for hope and destiny. Was it a replacement of God, or just symbolic manipulation to control? Nazism tried to build a political religion, Hitler as Messiah, the Reich as a millennial kingdom, and sacrifice for the fatherland as redemption. But did they truly believe this? Or was it simply a way to empty Christianity and fill it with a cult of the Führer? The answer isn't simple. The truth is, the result was the same. Millions of people gave their faith, their obedience, and even their lives, not to an eternal God, but to an empire that presented itself as sacred. The reasons are clear, coders. Because religion gives meaning to life and death. Because symbols are more powerful than speeches. Because by controlling the spiritual, you control the political and the social. In this crossroads of beliefs and manipulations, the Reich didn't just rule a country, it ruled souls.
Coders. What we've seen leaves us with a disturbing truth. Nazism was not only politics, armies, and wars. It was also an attempt to raise an alternative religion, with symbols, rituals, and a political messiah instead of God. They turned relics into propaganda, myths into justification, and faith into obedience. And they did it because they understood that whoever controls spirituality controls the hearts of the masses. But the big question remains. Coders, do you believe Nazi occultism was a real attempt to replace God, or just a mask of power to dominate the world? I want to read your thoughts in the comments, because your vision is key to keep piecing together this historical puzzle. And if this journey left you thinking, don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and share this video. That way, we'll continue uncovering together the darkest secrets and deepest mysteries of history.